I'm Eric Naso, and I'm with Matt Allard, and we are from newsshooter.com, and we're in Las Vegas. Matt, what time did we get here?
We got in about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I think.
Yeah. And by what time? I think it was like 3 o'clock, we went and picked up a camera.
We did go and pick up a camera.
And there's something on the table here. It's pretty cool. So what do we got here? This is an 8K sharp camera?
Yeah, this is something that you first saw at CES back in January, and Sharp said, we'll probably have a working version by NAB, and yes, they do have a working version. This has only been working, from my understanding, for the last couple of weeks.
It's amazing.
So this literally is the first iteration of this camera that is actually working and able to record an image. There's still a lot of features that haven't been implemented, but we weren't sure what to expect with this,
right?
Because we had no idea about specifications. We didn't know what was going to be working, what we were going to be able to do with it. But I did find out quite a bit from Sharp when I went over there to pick up this camera today as to what it's capable of. So first off, it is a micro four thirds mount camera, and it's using a 33 megapixel 8K sensor. Now, this is not a quad Bayer sensor. A lot of people thought, maybe this is the same sensor that was in the GH5S or the Blackmagic 4K cinema camera, and they just unlocked quad Bayer encoding to get an 8K image. That is not the case, apparently. According to Sharp, this is an actual 8K sensor, and it is being manufactured by Sharp. It's not coming from somebody else.
That's impressive in itself, because sensors aren't just coming out from any kind of company out there. There's very specific. Sony is one of the, what did you say? I think it was like 80% of the sensors out there that are in cameras and cell phones and GoPros, and they're all Sony sensors. So to have Sharp making their own sensors, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Sharp has a lot of resources because they are owned by Foxconn.
That's right.
And Foxconn also owns a bunch of other companies, including LCD panel manufacturers. So you can see why basically they've got the technology to build the entire camera themselves in-house. So a very interesting camera.
Now, it is a micro four thirds sensor.
Yes.
So that's probably why it's a micro four thirds mount.
Yes.
I think there were other cameras that used like an EF mount on a micro four thirds sensor too, right? Didn't like Blackmagic try that with the cinema camera, the older one back in the day? I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's
I think
been
they
a few
did.
different versions of things like that.
Now the the mount is electronic, so it's going to work with Lumix lenses, native lenses. You're going to be getting autofocus. Maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but right now this camera is not capable of that right now because it is kind of like a bleeding edge prototype camera right now.
Yeah, yes and no. Eventually it will support all native micro four thirds lenses in terms of being able to do autofocus. Now, I'm not sure at this stage whether that will include continuous autofocus. At the moment, you can do touch autofocus on the back screen. This is working so at the moment with native micro four thirds lenses. If you try and use an adapter, we've got a Metabone speed booster on here, which is a Nikon to micro four thirds mount here. Yeah, you don't get any support obviously for autofocus and things like that.
But in the future, I mean, the idea is definitely to be able to have autofocus, more auto features, kind of to what you would expect from a modern camera these days.
Yeah, I mean, given who this camera is sort of being aimed at, more sort of the consumer prosumer market, it has to be fairly easy to use, and I think that's probably the way Sharp have designed this. It's a very simplistic layout. Currently, there's no menu in here at all. There's no menu. I asked them, what menus can I go into? They said, well, they won't have a menu yet. So, but that is coming. So everything is touchscreen on the back. But regardless, it was very easy to use. When we took it out today, I mean, again, had no idea what to expect from this camera. And I thought, maybe it's going to be difficult to use because it doesn't have all these things implemented in there. Currently, it's only shooting in 8K 30p. Now, it does this in H.265 at in an MP4 wrapper at 200 megabits per second, which is relatively low bit rate for 8K, and it's all been done in a 420 8-bit at the moment. Sharp told me that they will have 420 10-bit internal recording, and then hopefully 422 10-bit external recording. And eventually this will be able to do 4K up to 60p as well.
And it has a USB-C input, so we're going to be able to use external like hard drives on it as well.
Yeah.
So you don't have to use an external recorder. You can just go directly to a hard drive, which that's really nice. It's a great feature.
I mean, that's the biggest surprise for me, I think, was the fact that, I thought, it's an 8K camera, what sort of media is it going to require and how long are you going to be able to record for? Right. But it's actually using regular off-the-shelf Class 10 UH, I think, 3 SD cards.
Yeah. There was nothing, that was no fancy card that was in there. And it didn't hiccup at all.
No, and it's a 64 gig card, and you can record for around 30 minutes on that card. So I think the whole idea behind this camera is it's no good aiming an 8K camera at a prosumer market if you can record, you have to buy a $700 card and you can record for 3 minutes on it. People are not going to want that. So I think the fact that, you can record for reasonable amounts of time on a regular available SD card is probably a bit of a selling point for this camera.
Now let's talk a little about, because we shot it, we'll talk about the user experience that you had in a second. Let's talk a little about the in and outs. It has, it's going to have full-size HDMI. It has a micro XLR, and has a USB-C. And
a 3.5 millimeter mic input jack. Yeah.
And so those are all good things. That's a very positive for this type of camera.
And there's an inbuilt stereo microphone in here that does record a scratch track. I mean, currently at the moment, none of these things here are working in terms of the mini XLRs or the mic input. I don't even know if the headphone jack works. We didn't really try that one. We didn't try that one out. Again, going back to what you said about USB-C on there, I asked this to Sharp. I said, look, in the future or down the line, even after you've released the camera, is it going to be possible to put in like higher bitrate codecs or whatever and then have them recorded externally to an SSD drive? And they said that's something they're definitely looking at.
That would be great because it keeps it small. And everybody likes compact cameras, especially, this could be applied to in so many different ways if it's kept compact. Sharp makes a lot of monitors. They make 8K monitors, they make giant monitors. They've been making monitors for quite a long time. What was your experience using the monitor only, because there's no EVF on this camera and it's not going to have any EVF. So what was it like for you shooting with that monitor on the back?
I mean, again, we'd only seen this previously and with it not working, so we had no idea what that back screen was going to look like. And actually I was reasonably impressed. It's nice and big, it's 5.5 inch, it looks got good color saturation, it seems reasonably sharp, excuse the pun there. The biggest problem at the moment currently is because there's no menu system and there's not a lot of features that are integrated in here, is that there was no focus peaking and there was no focus magnification. So even outside trying to get critical focus when shooting 8K, particularly if you were trying to shoot wide open, it was very difficult to sort of actually judge what was actually in focus. And what can look like it's very sharp on the screen, once you get that back into your computer and you look at it properly, it's very easy for it to be slightly off and it's very noticeable. But very usable. I was actually surprised because I thought, how's this going to cope outdoors? And most sort of cameras of this type with rear screens are pretty useless outdoors. I think the size, and it's got reasonable brightness, so we took it out and I was able to see it pretty clearly. Even when we used it in direct sun, in the afternoon sun here in Las Vegas, I could still see it. I had to cover it a little bit with my hand, but I could still see it. So I think it's very promising. Once it gets that focus punch in and the peaking, I think it's going to be much easier to use, especially since you can do everything by just touching the back screen.
Now, one thing I was impressed with is this camera uses LPE6 batteries. Those are small. This ran for almost an hour. I'd say a solid 45 minutes. We never shut it off, right? We left it on and just continuously ran around and got some B-roll. We went through I used the Canon, original OEM Canon batteries, because I think that's a good way to test something. Sometimes those third-party batteries, you don't know. That's a whole story in itself, right? You don't know what you're getting really. But I think we got about 45 minutes to an hour of record time. Didn't seem like it got hot. It just seemed like it continuously worked. No. Not really any like weird things happen other than some features that aren't available, right?
No real glitches or anything. I mean, the only time it sort of looked like it was playing up, I think, was when the battery was getting very low. Again, currently there's no battery indication in there, so you didn't know. But it seemed like when it got to the end, the screen got a little bit glitchy, and that was sort of a sign that the battery was going. But when we were normally shooting, not a single problem with it actually switching off or having any problems or having any corrupted footage. It was very impressive for any camera that's in this early stage to have that type of reliability. So I think looking forward, that seems to be a promising sign, I think, for this camera, because it is aimed at consumers and prosumers, so it needs to be fairly reliable.
Now, using it, obviously it doesn't come with an owner's manual because this thing is, bleeding edge, brand new. You got familiar with it quickly. It is touchscreen menus. The menu function doesn't work. So the only thing you had to operate it, was the touchscreen. What was that like?
Pretty easy, actually. I mean, currently on here there's only two modes. There's like a program auto mode and there is a manual mode. And I should go back to say too, currently we can't do any white balancing. It's fully auto white balance at the moment on the camera. Of course, that's not going to be the case when it ships. But from looking at the footage, did a reasonable job considering we're out here in Las Vegas. There's all sorts of different lighting sources, neon lights, harsh afternoon sun, reflections off buildings, off concrete. So it's a bit all over the place, but it seemed to do a reasonable job.
Yeah. Now, anything else you want to mention about your shooting experience with the camera?
Fairly easy. As you said, like, it doesn't come with a manual or anything, but it was a camera that you could literally just pick up and go out and shoot very quickly. I found it really easy to actually use, to make changes was very easy. I don't actually sort of like, in terms of the screen, if you just hold that for me, I know it flips around, and you can do all this sort of thing, but what I found is a lot of cases is, and that's the problem with these cameras, is if you've got them, you want to try and get some sort of low shot, you can't see the screen because it doesn't tilt.
Right.
So
there's always that. There's either one or the other, right? It's like everybody wants the flip out screen, and when you have the flip out screen, you want the tilt up screen. It's like you can't have it all, right?
It's fine when it's up here and you're shooting, but anytime you had it down here, I found it was impossible to use unless I was literally, on a couple of times it probably looked pretty weird when I was actually lying on the pavement, trying to get some shots. That would be my only complaint, usability wise. I think for a camera that doesn't have an EVF at all, it's doing a reasonable job in terms of being able to utilize it and shoot with it. Again, as I said, once that focus peaking and focus magnification comes in. Sorry, we're getting tired here. It's been a long day.
Been a long day.
I think it's very usable in its sort of form, and I quite like that because I think for me the whole nice thing about having a small camera is that you want to keep it small.
Yes.
I don't want to put tons of stuff on here, and I don't want to attach EVFs. I don't want to attach monitors. If I can just use it as it is like this, I think it's going to be pretty good. And then going back to battery life again, I think we're probably getting pretty good performance out of there. Whether that's probably going to go down slightly if you were using native micro four thirds lenses where it's communicating via the mount and the autofocus, and if you had your mini XLRs going in there and a few things like that, it might be reduced. Again, I was expecting the battery life to be very bad because Sharp told me we haven't optimized the battery performance on here at all, so it's not that great. But it lasted. As you said, we were out there for a few hours and we only went through two batteries. So I think that will probably improve again in the future, and it's just like having the SD card in there. It's a smart way by going with a Canon LP6 battery because they're readily available. They're not that expensive. For this type of camera, you don't want to go using expensive media, expensive proprietary battery solutions. I think that's a pretty good thing that Sharp have done there.
Yeah, pretty cool. All right, so we got the clips in. It wasn't the easiest thing to do because, again, this is like a brand new, it's not a brand new codec, but it's 8K in a kind of a consumer MP4 wrapper. So let's talk a little bit about the codec and our experience a little bit with just trying to play it back.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It may be aimed at a consumer or prosumer market, but certainly at this stage, it's even with these relatively low bitrate files, we struggled with it. We couldn't natively read them in Final Cut in the latest version. You tried it on Premiere, but not the latest, version of Premiere, and it wouldn't work. So whether it works in the latest version of Premiere, I'm not actually sure. So we actually had to bring it into a program called Kino and transcode it.
Yeah, and that did work.
That in there.
And also VLC Player didn't recognize it, and obviously QuickTime doesn't recognize it. So H.265 has been around for a little while, but it really hasn't been embraced all the way. And everybody, when they start putting their little flavors, it's kind of like RAW, right, with cameras.
Yeah.
With stills. It's like everybody has their own RAW, so you have to get the new update on Lightroom and all that. It's going to get supported eventually.
Yeah, like any new codec. Well, I mean, it's not a new codec. I think it's just the way maybe that they're wrapping it is sort of confusing some of the software. I'm sure that'll all be fixed by the time this actually goes to market.
And it's going to change anyway. Like I think it's going to be a 422 10-bit codec as opposed to this.
Well, a 420 10-bit
420
internal. Hope 10-bit. That's what Sharp is hoping for. Now, I guess people are probably going to want to know, what do the images actually look like? What sort of dynamic range does it have? How good is it in low light? So, well, let's run through that. I was reasonably happy with the performance of the images for a camera at this stage. It looked not bad considering the limitations that we have in terms of the white balance and everything else. And
focusing.
There's no picture profiles or anything like that currently in the camera, so it's just going straight to a baked-in Rec 709 look. Mm-hmm. Dynamic range. Sharp doesn't want to officially say what the dynamic range of this camera is because they're still tinkering with it. I would estimate that it's, probably somewhere between 10 and 12 stops would be my estimate. Mm-hmm. That's maybe not a perfect estimate, but that's what I would think. The clips seemed to look a little bit better than what they did on the back of the screen in terms of dynamic range once you brought them in. I think the screen sort of probably
it's crushing the
blacks a little bit more than what you probably what you're actually getting. What else?
One thing I did notice, we noticed pretty quickly, there is a pretty intense rolling shutter on the camera.
Oh yeah, the rolling shutter is not good. I'll put it that way.
I think we both said, well, it's probably one of the worst we've ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, if that happens.
It's not good. Whether that will improve, I don't know. I mean, I think the thing with this camera ultimately is it's really a trade-off between resolution, dynamic range, and low light performance. The problem is when you go to something like this, like 8K, they're really prioritizing resolution over everything else.
Right.
So everything else is then going to be compromised by that resolution. And you're only using a micro four thirds sensor. So, there's going to be some problems there. In terms of low light performance, it's not great, but it's not horrible either.
Right.
I think, we got some shots tonight. If I pushed it up to around 2000 ISO, I think you could probably go to like 3200 maybe. Yeah. Once you start to get above those levels there, it's got some pretty bad fixed pattern noise. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's anything that's going to be improved by the time this camera actually launches. But, we were able to get vision outside that looked reasonably good and not too noisy considering, the size of the resolution and all the other associated problems that are going on with this camera.
And it, because it's going to be tough for us because we don't have an 8K monitor, so we're always going to see it in probably more of a 4K environment or a 5K environment until we get an 8K monitor to actually see what it looks like. So we're really not going to know exactly what that noise is going to look like.
I did see some of it.
On an 8K monitor, that noise could be ginormous, but on a 4K monitor, it's going to be a little bit, condensed down. So
when I was picking this camera up, actually, they had one of them hooked up to a Sharp 8K monitor down on the show floor at NAB, and this was actually outputting full 8K over a single HDMI cable to an 8K monitor.
Now that's impressive.
And they ran it up for me. They ran the ISO up, and once it got to a certain point, you could see, particularly an 8K monitor, the noise was a lot of fixed pattern sort of noise there. It looked quite ugly. I don't think they have any qualms. They're not marketing this camera as being a low light beast.
Right.
That's not what it is.
Sure.
But it's not horrible, and I think most people who are going to use it for its intended purpose will probably be reasonably happy. I think
2000 ISO is a very reasonable range. I mean, it's in the professional world we don't, and generally we're like around 800 1,000. I mean, I generally don't need to go much higher than that because I'm using lights. But if you're natural, running around with shooting natural light all the time, you're always going to have that challenge no matter what camera you really use. So I was impressed when we got Kino. How do you say that? I can't remember.
I think it's Kino.
Kino. We had some really nice detail. We zoomed in and saw 200, 400% on an eye. The eyelashes were pretty crisp. But again, and then we looked at some other shots. Man, look a little fuzzy, but it's really hard to know because focusing can be an issue. But those macro shots that you were able to get really nice tight shots, the detail in the hair and in the eye and in the skin, it looked pretty good. And also, I kind of thought the skin tone itself was actually pretty good. That's one of the toughest things for cameras is color science. And I think they might be going somewhere. They're going in the right direction a little bit with that color science. It's an early thing to say, but it didn't look horrible.
Yeah, I mean, it looked all right. Again, you've got that problem with it. It's a baked-in Rec 709, and it's doing auto white balance, so it was constantly reading the scene and changing. But yeah, I thought it did a reasonable sort of job. It didn't look, it didn't look bad. Put it that way. What people consider good and what people consider bad.
Yeah.
In some cases, very personal things.
Yeah.
But it showed promise. That's for sure.
Yeah, and we couldn't do obviously. Look, we got this camera for a few hours today, and then we're going to get it back tomorrow. It would have been wonderful to be able to do charts, and we can do aliasing tests. We just can't do that. But I didn't see anything. Did you see any aliasing? We shot a lot of buildings with a lot of lines. Didn't get a brick wall or a distracting shirt.
It seemed to look okay, but again, you need to spend more time with it to know for certain. I did see what. I haven't looked at it on the computer yet, but I did see it on the back of the monitor. It almost looked like there was some bit of banding in the sky, particularly when you're shooting a blue sky with heavy, sort of the sun coming down there and stopping down. You could see some banding in the sky, whether that's present on the actual clips or just on the back monitor. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if there is banding, given it's the amount of resolution it's trying to squeeze into a fairly compact compressed file. It would not surprise me, being 4208-bit, that you're going to see things like banding in the sky. Yeah.
Well, all in all, I mean, Matt, I think this is really exciting for Sharp. I think it's really exciting for all of us as consumers to have a new player in town. Sharp makes great products. They have great monitors. And they have a full-on 8K camera. I don't think a lot of people realize they have a broadcast camera that is going to be used during the Tokyo Olympics, right? So they're already in this game. So this is kind of an interesting way of, where are they going to go from here? We're only going to see more, I think, from Sharp.
Yeah, and I think it was more of a surprise than anything. I don't think anybody expected that Sharp were going to be the ones who were going to bring out the first sort of consumer-orientated 8K camera. I really would have thought it may have come from, say, Panasonic or Sony. I think at the moment it's sort of like anything that's new. Like, we've never seen an 8K camera in this price range for what this camera is supposedly going to be marketed at. I think around $3,000. So the fact that they've been able to put all that in there is impressive in itself. Yes. And I think really it's more of a proof of concept camera at this stage to show everybody, hey, look, we can do this. Yeah. I would expect this type of, to see more 8K cameras in similar size and stuff to this coming in over the next couple of years from, the major players. Yeah.
Well, it's really nice at Sharp. It's dangerous for companies to give cameras to guys like us. And we really do appreciate that they did it. And, we're not blowing smoke and being too nice to them. We're telling you what we saw. We're telling you what we experienced. And, nothing really horrible happened. It is a crippled camera because, it's crippled because it's not finished. But
and I appreciated that they were upfront with us and they basically said, okay, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. This is what you should expect. So my expectations were actually very low when I first picked up this camera. I really didn't think... I had no idea what it was actually going to be like in the end. And it sort of surprised me a little bit. Considering how new it is in its development, it's showing a lot of promise.
All right, Matt. Well, that's about it. I think that's really cool. I'm Eric Naso, and I'm with Matt Allard. We are with newshooter.com at NAB 2019. We have a ton of stuff on deck, right, man? We're going to be hitting the floor tomorrow. It's Sunday tomorrow. It's not even open yet. right?
Well, it'll probably already be Sunday by the time
By
you
the
watch
time
this.
you see this, it will be. So, yeah, this was really exciting. And, hey, a whole lot more coverage to come. Make sure you guys hit the website, constantly refresh, because we are going to be working hard. I think there's some cool stuff we're going to see, right?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks.